Duval. Welcome to Bleav in Jaguars. I'm Bucky Brooks. What's up, Duval? It is your favorite Jag, Bucky Brooks, and this is Bleav in Jaguars, a podcast dedicated to all things Jacksonville Jaguars. And we're really excited this week. We had owner Shad Khan last week talk after they agreed to the stadium renovations and things that are going to keep the Jaguars for a long time. So we don't have to worry about the Jaguars moving. Yes, we'll play some games overseas, but the Jaguars will be in Duval for the foreseeable future, and that is a good thing. But one of the things that came out of the conversation that we'll talk about is Shad Khan talking about the 1-5 finish was an organizational failure. We'll touch on that after we talk about our sponsor, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right to the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with our 150-plus slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. And so Shad Khan had some interesting comments during his conversation talking about the stadium agreement. And one of the things that stood out to me was Shad Khan saying that the 1-5 finish was an organizational failure. He couldn't believe that the team couldn't win 2 games to really solidify itself into the postseason. And he said that the fact that this team couldn't do it, it falls on everyone within the organization. Let me say this, man. I actually love this from the owner in terms of calling the entire organization out, because that's just not placing the blame on the coaches or the players or the front office. Everyone had a role in the Jaguars failing. And so what I want to do is I want to tell you why I'm so optimistic about the team really utilizing that lesson to be a much better team and organization going forward. Because sometimes you kind of have to hit a low point before you can bounce back and really achieve the success, realize the potential that this squad has. And I want to start out and talking about the finish. Why did it fall apart for the Jaguars, and how have they repaired it? Well, there have been a lot of reasons cited for why the team didn't finish well. We've talked about the injuries, and there were a ton of injuries. The wide receiver core wasn't healthy. Lost Kirk, couldn't play with him. In essence, at some points, just had Calvin Ridley and maybe Evan Ingram playing with a cast of young players that were still trying to figure it out. Zay Jones was in and out the lineup, so you didn't get that part going. Offensive line should be shuffled the deck. But didn't have the protection in front of Trevor Lawrence. Trevor's banged up, beat up. The running game couldn't get going. So offensively, it looked nothing like the high-powered offense that we expected at the beginning of the year. On the other side of the ball, the defense just fell apart down the stretch. The running game, was problematic because the run defense, look, the last games, they surrendered 44 more rushing yards per game on average. Like, that is crazy for a team that really had prided itself in really stopping the run. And then the other thing that really plagued and victimized the team throughout the season, but really down the stretch, the missed tackles. Just way too many missed tackles. 126 missed tackles by the team per Pro Football Reference. That was 4th most in the National Football League. You miss tackles, you're going to have problems. So some of the issues that we saw on both sides of the ball, the lack of continuity on offense led to poor execution, and the lack of, I would say, just execution on defense really created some issues. And what that led to was, some of the fallout that we saw immediately after the season. One of the more notable things that stood out, they fired the entire defensive staff for the most part. Mike Caldwell and company were removed. They were dismissed. And a lot of the stuff that came out about the dismissal, it was the execution or the lack of execution in key moments. And even though we could say that the defense outperformed the offense, I think there were some things that led Doug Peterson to want to have a change. And I would say from my vantage point, one of the things was it just didn't appear that the team was on the same page in terms of coaches and players being connected. It didn't appear to have a level of organization and structure to the defense that you knew that everyone understood exactly what they were doing. And I would say that maybe some of the instruction was a little false in terms of clearly communicating what the expectations were, or clearly communicating, what you wanted from a scheme design, a play design, or those things. And look, there's a saying in football where they talk about a practice performance ends up leading to game reality. How you work in practice ultimately determines how you're going to play in the game. And too often there were whispers that, look, the team, they didn't get some of the issues corrected on the practice field. And so when those issues popped up on game day, it wasn't a surprise because there hadn't been, I would say, maybe the level of accountability that you needed to get this unit to perform at a high level. And it wasn't necessarily the talent, because the Jaguars were certainly talented enough to be able to get it done. You had double-digit sack artists on each side of the line. You had Josh Allen playing well. You had Trayvon Walker playing well as a second-year player. You had a secondary that made enough plays to continue to keep you in games. But the thing that hurt you was the secondary fell apart in key moments. Blown assignments, getting beat on coverage, not necessarily knowing what to do or how to cover for your teammate. All of those things were issues. And it wasn't just the secondary. It also happened at the second level when it came to the linebackers. So the number one thing that Doug Peterson wanted to do, he wanted to change the voice at the front of the room, but also streamline some of the instruction, make sure everyone was on the same page, maybe become a team that is a little more dialed in detail, doing fewer things, simpler things, but doing them really, really well, as opposed to maybe trying to trick the opponent, trying to bring complicated pressures and blitzes and those things, which ultimately confused our own squad and our own unit. Enter Ryan Nielsen and his staff, and you've already seen some of the things that they've talked about. Obviously, you guys haven't been privy to minicamp practices or some of the OTA sessions, but I can tell you there's a significant difference in how they go about doing their business. This team is really committed to the fundamentals. You see them work through the fundamentals. They're running to the ball. They're doing all the little things that you would want to see in a high school team, but you also see when it comes to a really good pro team. They're dialed in and buttoned up with their footwork and fundamentals, and that will give them a chance to always be in the right position, doing the right things when they're expected to do it. The other thing that I will say is, just from top to bottom, the organization, the instruction, and the overall execution will be better, because I Bleav the coaching staff has a real good feel for how they want to put things in, and they do a great job of taking that, I would say, high level information from the coaches and conveying it to the players. And ultimately, that's what coaching is. Coaching is taking all of these things that you have in your mind and trying to clearly get young people to understand what you're asking them to do, how you're asking them to do it, and when you're asking them to do those things. People are talking about the old adage, alignment, assignment, adjustment. We break the huddle. Let's make sure we get lined up right. Let's make sure we understand what our assignments are. And then if any movement, any shift or anything causes us to make an adjustment, let's go ahead and rehearse what that adjustment is going to be prior to the snap, prior to them doing the motion. And when teams are diligent and detailed enough to understand those three things, alignment, assignment, adjustment, it gives them an opportunity to play well against whatever it is they're facing. The other thing that keeping it simple and keeping it fundamental does is it allows your players to get better and better each week. They're able to kind of monitor where they're at when it comes to their progress in the playbook, or where they're at in terms of being able to understand how they're being asked to play within a certain scheme. All of those things come with repetition. And if you're able to do simple things over and over and over again, you then go from being a guy that is running the drill to now you master and own the drill. And with that ownership comes more confidence. More confidence leads to more plays and timely splash plays. And those things lead your defense to go from being in the middle of the pack to a top 10, possibly top 5 unit. To me, all of the things will change as Ryan Nielsen and the rest of his staff gets comfortable really kind of putting their imprint on this squad. When I look at how they've been going about like practicing and doing those things, I can hear what Ryan Nielsen says in the presser, but I can see it when I go to practice. And being able to get the vision done from board to the field is the biggest challenge that any coach has. And I think he comes in at a right time because the defense had been beaten down a little bit. The defense had been catching a lot of strays for not playing well enough to help the team win the game down the stretch and secure a top position. And so there's been a concerted effort to change some of that environment, some of that culture in the locker room and in the meeting room and those things. And speaking to a couple players, they talked about how they can up the ante and they can just tell that the coaching staff knows exactly what they want and they're really able to communicate it. I would say even over communicate what the expectations are, how you're supposed to play it, how you're supposed to line up, and really holding the players accountable for being able to execute those things in practice. Because I'm sure, and I haven't been validated from any of the coaches, but I'm sure during this part of the year, you're trying to figure out who are the guys that I can trust. So without the pressure of the game, who are the guys that I can trust that can do exactly what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do coverage? Who are the 3 deep defenders that can make sure that nothing flies over top of the defense? And as you begin to gain that trust and respect from those veteran players who show you that, hey, I'm a lineup coach and I'm going to do the exact thing that you want me to do. I'm going to do it all day. And I'm not going to get bored doing the same thing over and over again because that's how we have to do it and that's how we have to get it done. So that level of accountability on defense to me is important. And it's one of the things that was a positive from the negative fallout in terms of the dismissal of the defensive coaches, bringing a whole new staff in and them implementing their own ways. I think you can see a cultural change. I would expect you to continue to see a cultural change when this unit takes the field in training camp. But it extends beyond the offense. Extends beyond the defense. Let's talk about the offense. I talked about the injuries being a big part of it. We talked about the wide receivers, Zay Jones and Christian Kirk not being available. So it's Calvin Ridley and then Elijah Cooks and Washington to go with Evan Ingram. You just didn't have enough firepower to be able to contend with some of the top teams in the league. And so the lesson to be learned there is, hey, let's make sure we have upgrades at all those spots. Let's make sure that the backups that are going on the bus, going on trips, that they have value because they really can play. The lesson that I Bleav this team learned, man, Christian Kirk was such a valuable piece to the puzzle. And when you lose that guy that can dominate the middle of the field, it renders you helpless offensively if you don't have the ability to execute full field reads, or if you don't have a playbook that really works from east to west at different depths to be able to exploit the opposing defense. To me, that falls on Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are responsible for putting the play designs in, putting the schemes in, and calling the game in an order that allows the Jaguars to set things up and then to exploit the defense when the defense overreacts to something that they're anticipating down the line. When I look at the running game, and we talked about the offensive line, struggling particularly right in the middle. Brandon Sheriff and Gordon did not play great. They did not play well when they had their opportunity, and so you couldn't run the football effectively. Last year, the Jaguars had they had poor numbers, but last year, 26.5% of their runs were either for 0 yards or they were negative gains. That is hard to overcome. That's most in the league by percentage. So the offensive line doesn't get up. They can't create a push. You can't run the football. So now your coordinator's looking at second and long yardage, third and long yardage. And there are only so many plays that you can put up on the board that will allow you to consistently get those long yardage situations. So the failure of the coaching staff to kind of get this offense up and going and put them in the right position to make plays. Yeah, some of the Jaguars' failures fall on them. And so the coaches have to be singled out for failing to be able to properly prepare. And even though ultimately the players are responsible for doing it, you got to demand a little more from the coaches. And as we all know, it all rolls downhill. I would anticipate everyone having their antennas up and making sure that they're quickly going through all of the drills on the practice field, quickly going through all the fundamental things that are necessary, and playing with a level of urgency that will enable them to have a shot to win against some of these top teams. But it extends beyond the coaches and what we talked about in terms of dealing with the playbook, maximizing the talents of the best players while doing it under a principle of keep it simple, stupid, meaning let's keep it simple. Let's allow them to play fast. Let's not try and trick everybody into thinking that we have all these different things. Let's do what we do and do it at such a level that the other team wilts under the pressure of trying to combat what we do on a daily basis. And I think as long as the offense can get back to that part of it, simplifying everything, making sure number 16, the quarterback, is very comfortable directing the offense where he's going to be challenged to do more, particularly given the contract situation, is really on the play caller. Look, whether it's listen, it is on them to make the game easy for the quarterback, and then it's on the quarterback to make the game easy for everyone else outside of that. More confident now because the buzz and the conversation has been, don't know who's going to call the plays. Last year was very definitive and defined that, hey, Press Taylor's going to be the guy. This year it seems like he may be walking that back because last year he had to pay close attention to the defense. Maybe now he has more room to breathe when it comes to the offense, and that'll lead him back into the lead role when it comes to the offense. I will say this, hasn't been validated, but to my eye, the offense is different when Doug Peterson's calling the plays versus when Press Taylor's calling the plays. Doug Peterson, early in Trevor Lawrence's career, utilized a lot of horizontal things to help unlock him and get his percentages up, meaning shallow crossers at different levels, 5, 10, 15, right in front of the face of the quarterback, so the quarterback knew exactly what was going on. He also did a really good job when it came to the quarterback. Doug Peterson managed the quarterback effectively and had him do things that were within his wheelhouse. We need that version of Doug Peterson to take over and to make sure that Trevor is playing at his best when the season kicks off by putting him in favorable matchups, favorable situations, favorable play calls that will allow him to show the talent that dazzled everyone when he was the number 1 overall pick. When it goes from the coaches, it then comes down to front office. And I could have done it in reverse, and we can talk about chicken and egg and who has more responsibility. I put it on the coaches first because the coaches are responsible for the on-field product. They didn't necessarily do, I would say, the greatest job with the on-field product a season ago, and they've made the changes to what I would say improve the roster at each of those spots to get better instruction and personnel and all of that stuff together. The front office plays a part in the failure because when you look at that team, one of the things that a general manager is supposed to do is to understand where the team is here and now, while also casting an eye towards the future to know who is in the pipeline to get ready for. Meaning, if there's a hot shot player or quarterback in the next draft, you want to make sure you're on it because you have those things, particularly if it was a need. If there's a defensive lineman, an edge rusher, someone that you know that the Jags are going to need down the line, you already want to be on it. The other part of that is when you're the front office, you want to identify the types of players that you want to have on your squad. And when I mean types, I'm talking about the prototypes. What do we want this team to look like? How do we want to look when we walk off the bus? Do we look like a heavyweight team? You know, this goes back to, look, in old Bill Parcells ism that then went to Nick Saban and those things. But coaches believe that there are reasons why, when you look at boxing matches, that you have guys in different weight classes. And there's a reason why middleweights don't fight heavyweights, because of the punching power of the heavyweights going to knock the middleweight out. So a lot of teams, and Trent Baalke falls in line with this, you want to build a heavyweight team, meaning that the words that Baalke and the front office have used the entire offseason is bigger, stronger, more physical. So you want to make sure that now when you're acquiring players, they all fit into that mode, particularly when you're looking at the teams that have been dominating in the AFC. The number one rule is you build your team to win your division. So the Houston Texans won the division. Can you build a team that can knock them off as they're presently constructed? So that's the thing. The other part is when you're building your team, we got to build a team to beat the top teams in this conference. So in the AFC, you're talking about Kansas City, you're talking about Baltimore, talking about Pittsburgh and those teams, the rough and tumble, the entire AFC North, you got to contend. The Buffalo Bills are still in that conversation. Can you build a team that can go toe-to-toe with those squads in meaningful games? And when Trent Baalke said immediately after the season, hey, man, we got to be bigger, stronger. We need to be more physical. I think the actions behind the Jaguars signings suggest that his words have been followed. The actions I'm talking about are guys like Aaron Armstead coming on board, physical presence on the interior of the defense. Gabe Davis coming on board on the outside to give them a big-bodied number one receiver that they really haven't had, even though he is vying for that role. Adding another big, fast, physical player in Brian Thomas Jr. to compete with Gabe Davis, maybe for the wide receiver 2 or 3 role to be able to make an impact on the perimeter, create plays and those things. He goes beyond that. Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, prototypes, big bodies, physical bodies, long, athletic, plays on the line of scrimmage, have a little edge to the game. Well, now you begin to look at the team the way it's been constructed. You're beginning to have more of those prototypical bodies. When you throw Eric Armstead in there beside Trayvon Walker, you look at Roy Robinson Harris, you look at Josh Allen. That is now what looks like a heavyweight defensive line that can get after you. You look at the linebackers behind them, Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd, after he's packed on some pounds in terms of physicality, the way that he looks like an NFL linebacker that's built to do the hard stuff. You look at the secondary. There's enough length in the secondary to challenge guys man-to-man. As much as everyone talks about Tyson Campbell on the other side, Ron Darby's going to be able to challenge people. He brings some of that natural edge to it. That is a direct reflection of the front office understanding what they needed. Offensively, Mitch Morse coming in to eventually replace Luke Ford at point of attack. Mitch Morse giving them that veteran leadership that they desperately needed. You talk about leaders and those other things, guys coming from those programs to be able to get it done. Darnell Savage helping the defense, being able to make it happen. All of these things were done from a front office standpoint intentionally. The intent is not only to make the team bigger, stronger, more physical, a team that can go toe-to-toe with the heavyweights in the AFC, but to make sure they look the part, they understand what they're doing, which comes to the coaching, and then they perform at a high level. Because remember, once again, we talk about practice, performance becomes game reality. And if you have a heavyweight team that goes about their business like pros in a high end, you're going to have a lot of opportunity to win games. The final part of it, and it's something that we've talked about. So when we talked about the players, I talked about the prototypes and those things. But to me, there was something that was just a little off in the locker room last year. And what I mean off, not in terms of like guys not getting along, but in watching the magical season 2022 and watching how this team came together 2022, 2023, how they came together, they played together, didn't worry about who got the credit. They just all pitched in before they decided to dip out. Last year, I don't know if it was that same connectivity with the team. Guys said the right things, but I don't know if those actions matched the words that were sputtered, that was spit out there. And so Doug Peterson sees this, looks at this, and obviously is disappointed because you got back-to-back winning seasons, but you're 9-8, 9-8. And the way that you fell apart last year after an 8-3 start, there's something that you're worried about that is wrong in the locker room. So I Bleav he might have been the driving force, but he led some of this sea change in terms of the players that came in and what kind of pelts they had on the wall. Eric Armstead played for the San Francisco 49ers, went to 2 Super Bowls, a team that really prides itself in being the bully on the block. What can the Jaguars learn from his experience prior to coming to Jacksonville that can help them be a better team when it comes to finishing games the right way, finishing seasons the right way, those things. So Armstead's value not only as a prototypical dominant interior player, but his championship pedigree in terms of being able to get to a Super Bowl, know what it looks like, know what is required to get there, he can offer that. Mitch Morse on offense, being able to offer similar things. Look, this is a guy that's bounced around, been in a few different spots, but a couple of years he's been in Buffalo with Josh Allen. Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills have been the class of the AFC East. They've been the teams that has always been in the conversation. Morse was a big part of that. Well, what can he take from those perennial winning ways and sprinkle in and talk to the team about, How can he display enough leadership to get them to understand here are the little things that we need to work on to really be great and to really maximize our potential and opportunities? Mitch Morse being able to help that on offense, man, it just allows everyone else to kind of fall in line and get in where they fit in when it comes to the leadership. Darnell maybe one to talk to the small group with the DBs because he's been there. He's had some success. He's been on teams that has been expected to play at a high level, and they have played at a high level. You're talking about Ron Darby. Well, with Doug Peterson in Philadelphia, he understands what it looks like putting two of those savvy vets in the DB room to kind of help raise the football IQ and the emotional maturity of that unit. So when I look at all of the things that happened since the end of the season, man, I can just check off the boxes in so many areas and tell you that this team is a much better team than the one that walked off the field the last game of the season against the Tennessee Titans. This team is better because I Bleav there's a crew of coaches that are going to hold them, the players accountable, and they're going to get every last drop of effort and energy and stuff out of them. The other part of it that stands out to me is you made the change at defense. You made a change on offense when it came to some of your coaches. You want more guys that are going to represent it like you represent it, and I think that will show up. The playbooks and those things, I think there's been a real emphasis on simplification. Make sure everyone knows exactly what they're doing, how they want to get it done. That is huge because a lot of the errors and a lot of the games that the Jags lost, they were self-inflicted. Mistakes, mental miscues, blown assignments, almost turnovers, ball security, just not taking care of the little stuff. I think some of that will change as you have coaches that are more focused on the fundamentals as opposed to scheming and tactics. A lot of times you'll see a team flourish technically because they don't have as much to worry about when it comes to thinking, and that allows them to play fast. And then the final part of it is just, the guys physically who also have the right mentality. Championship guys have that extra stuff that they bring, that magic dust that they can sprinkle on everybody else. And because all these dudes are good dudes, great football character, they're winners, they've been around winning programs, what you're hoping to do is infuse the locker room with enough winners that everyone begins to change their habits so they become champion caliber habits as opposed to normal, hey, let me get to the league and let me figure out how to individually do my own thing. Nah, you want the team to exhibit those championship habits so eventually they can play at that level. So that's a little bit of why I'm really, really confident in the team bouncing back, why I expect all those things that Shad Khan talked about in terms of just being an organizational failure. I think that actually serves as the springboard for a team to have a great 2024. Might not hear about them now, but I think you hear about this team later. And so there you have it. That's Bleav in Jaguars. I'm Bucky Brooks. Until next time, come back in and check us out. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you tell a friend to join the community. We can continue to do great stuff. Training camp is only 3 weeks away. It is about to be on and popping, and I can't wait to talk more about the Jaguars on Bleav in Jaguars. Until next time, I'll talk to you.